Home in Rome. His 10-day trip to Cuba and the U.S. finally over. Pope Francis is safely back at the Vatican tonight. A human right. On his trip home, Francis defends the right to conscientious objection. President Obama at the UN. The United States is willing to work with any nation to solve the Syrian conflict. And Francis Festival. Families thrilled to be near the Holy Father and the stars who came out to sing for him. Those stories and more tonight from Philadelphia and Washington. EWTN News Nightly's Pope in America special for Monday, September 28th, 2015. Good evening from Philadelphia's historic Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul. I'm Brian Patrick, and this is the very first stop that the Pope made on his visit here. With our EWTN News Nightly team here in Philadelphia as well as in D.C., it is good to have you with us for our continuing coverage. So Pope Francis is back in Rome tonight after 10 packed days on the road. He first visited, of course, Washington, then New York, and here in Philadelphia, here in the United States. That was after 4 days in Cuba. The Holy Father continued his tradition of praying before an image of Our Lady at Rome's Basilica of St. Mary Major before and after his apostolic trips. He went there as he arrived home. Just a few hours earlier on the papal plane, Pope Francis defended religious liberty. He told reporters everyone has the right to conscientious objection.
Che l'oggezione di coscienza è un diritto.
The pontiff saying government officials can refuse to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. He says they are exercising the human right of conscientious objection. Alan Holdren was on the papal plane when the Holy Father said that. Alan?
Well, the Pope was asked specifically about whether or not government officials have conscientious objection rights. This was in reference to the case of Kim Davis in Kentucky, who was thrown in jail for not issuing a marriage license to a same-sex couple. The Pope didn't specifically comment on that case, but he did say that every single person, as a human being, has a right to conscientious objection, and that includes also government officials. He also spoke about sex abuse. He was asked why he had consoled bishops in the United States for the cases of sex abuse in their diocese. He said that many of them have wept. Any bishop, he said, that is covered up cases of sex abuse is in fact guilty of wrongdoing. He visited himself with victims of sex abuse while he was in Philadelphia. There were 5 of them there that met with him in a private meeting. He also spoke about the incredible welcome that he received in the United States. He commented on the kindness of the people, on the piety of the faithful. He said that it was a great experience, and I think it was really eye-opening for him as well. It was his first experience in the United States, and he saw American Catholicism at its best.
Thank you, Alan. I was at St. Charles Borromeo Seminary here in the Philadelphia area when the Holy Father told about 300 bishops that he had just met with victims of clergy sex abuse a few minutes earlier. He acknowledged that some bishops failed in their responsibility to protect children. He firmly stated that bishops and other church leaders will be held accountable. The Holy Father then turned his attention to the family, urging his fellow shepherds to see the church and family as allies. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands gather on Philadelphia's Benjamin Franklin Parkway Sunday. This was to witness Pope Francis closing out the 6-day trip to the United States. People waited for hours to clear airport-style security. They lined the streets, overflowing the wide parkway for the largest and final event of the Pope's U.S. visit. In his homily, the Holy Father emphasized the importance of family and togetherness.
Una especie de milagro nel mundo de hoy.
The Holy Father speaking in Spanish, calling the gathering a miracle in today's world. As the Mass closed, it was announced the next World Meeting of Families in 2018 will be in Dublin. Well, remember Brett Halbrich. Brett is the St. Louis boy who was granted a very special and unusual wish. The 12-year-old has a brain tumor that is inoperable, and this is a weekend to remember for him here in Philadelphia, as Catherine Szeltner tells us.
Brian, Brett completed his latest round of chemotherapy last month. The World Meeting of Families heard his story and surprised Brett and his parents with tickets to Philadelphia's Papal Mass. We got to join the family's journey.
In St. Louis, Brett Halbrich is better known as the boy who was a priest for a day. The St. Louis Archdiocese and Make-A-Wish Foundation teamed up in April so Brett could process in with priests and seminarians for Holy Thursday Chrism Mass. This week, Brett had a new wish.
I hope to see him bless people like with the holy water, like with a little stick. He does the I'm not really sure what that's called. But.
When speaking about Pope Francis, Brett sounds older than his age.
So helps the homeless, helps people.
And he gives up his time to help people.
But he's definitely a 12-year-old boy. The walk from the Howbridge's hotel to the Mass is long and sometimes confusing. After making it through a security checkpoint, the Howbridges arrive at the Benjamin Franklin Parkway.
How you guys feel? Good. I'm tired but excited.
Nearly 3 miles and 2 hours later, they settle into their seats. Pope Francis is the star here, with lots of practical advice for families. For the Howbridges, seeing him is a big gift.
Very exciting.
Yes,
it's an honor and a blessing.
Yes, it is like a miracle. It's like great.
Big gift. They won't soon forget.
Doctors say Brett is doing much better than expected. His next MRI is scheduled for November. We continue to keep Brett and his entire family in our prayers.
How encouraging. I saw you and his family at the Mass.
Oh, yeah,
beautiful.
I went into that. They are a beautiful family.
Catherine, thank you. Well, on Saturday night, families came together to laugh and to dance and to hear the Holy Father's heartfelt words. A party atmosphere, a celebration like no other. Families slept at the zoo, even on sidewalks, for a chance to see Pope Francis and the stars performing for him at Saturday night's Festival of Families.
Been here all day. It's been a long day, but it's been amazing.
After his long day, the Pope seemed to be truly enjoying the lighter moments. He tossed out a few zingers of his own in a heart-to-heart talk about family life.
Padre,
Father,
usted habla así porque es soltero.
you speak like that because you're not married.
Las familias discutimos.
Families, we quarrel.
Las familias a veces vuelan los platos.
And sometimes plates can fly.
No voy a hablar de la suegra.
I won't speak about mother-in-laws.
His warm fatherly approach appealing to several generations.
He's bringing our church and the world together.
The night ends with a prayerful send-off from a friend and fellow shepherd.
From all of us here tonight, we thank you and we say together, God bless Pope Francis.
And certainly the Holy Father on that Saturday night had us laughing and crying at the same time. Talk a little bit, Dr. Matthew Bunson, tell us a little bit about the tone of this entire visit.
Yeah, well, obviously it was a monumental success for Pope Francis. Probably the most monumental visit by a pope since 1979 with John Paul II's first visit to the United States.
And he was here in the Philadelphia area.
He was. Where John Paul II brought a message of be not afraid, Pope Francis brought a simple message of Jesus loves you. And that, I think, is one of the things that people are going to take with them. We've obviously seen popes give a lot of speeches over the years, but Pope Francis used both speeches and images.
He used a lot of speeches, and he used homilies. He talked a lot. There were scripts that were embargoed until they were released, but all those words, will anyone remember what he said?
I dare say that somebody who went to the Festival of Families on Saturday or to the Papal Mass on Sunday can probably barely remember anything that he said, but they will take back the powerful images that they saw, him greeting the sick, the frail, stopping the papal motorcade to hug the paraplegics. Those are the images they're going to take with them, and it's the images, I think, that will long endure.
So some of us were blessed to be here, right in front of the Holy Father when he was saying some of these things.
Yeah.
But we have to remember, this was heard and seen all over the world. I know Pope Francis was aware of that. Did he accomplish what he set out to do?
He did, absolutely, for a couple of reasons. Consider that his papal events were broadcast on every network. Every newspaper covered them. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people came out for them. What did they see? What they saw was the authentic family, happy families, Catholic families. It was a message that Pope Francis brought not just to American Catholics, but to all Americans, to have an encounter. And by having that encounter, one of those pillars of his pontificate, they had an encounter with Jesus. And I think that was a life-changing experience.
You and I were there when he encountered more than 300 of his bishops from around the world. Are they moved to do what he's calling on the church to do?
That's the next question. Yeah. What do we do with this visit? We follow his advice, we take it out, we bring Christ to everyone, to the peripheries, as Pope Francis asks us.
Dr. Matthew Bunson, the author of the Encyclopedia of the Saints and many other books. Always great to have you with us.
Wonderful to be with you, especially on this journey.
Yes. We have many more stories from here that you're not going to see anywhere else. But there are other news stories that are being covered in our Washington with our Washington team led by Wyatt Goolsby. Wyatt?
Thanks, Brian. Yes, world leaders are meeting at the UN General Assembly this week. President Obama spoke there this morning. Jason Calvi has been covering that today. He joins us now with more on that. Jason.
Wyatt, President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin gave clashing speeches. Behind the scenes, it was the first time the two met in nearly a year. One big area of disagreement, the Syrian civil war. As world leaders gather in New York, millions of Syrians have left their homes, many now streaming into Europe, escaping a nearly 5-year-old Syrian civil war. Since 2011, more than 250,000 people died in the conflict.
The situation in Syria is very, very bad. No electric, no water, nothing, no internet, nothing there, okay, to live.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is asking for the Syrian situation to be referred to the International Criminal Court. Moon says 5 countries hold the key to the Syrian crisis: Russia, the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey.
4 years of diplomatic paralysis by the Security Council and others have allowed the crisis to spin out of control.
Russia is allied with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Russia has deepened support for Assad with more military equipment and troops. Putin says Syria's army is best equipped to fight extremists like the Islamic State.
We think it is an enormous mistake to refuse to cooperate with the Syrian government and its armed forces who are violently fighting terrorism face to face.
But President Obama disagreed.
In accordance with this logic, we should support tyrants like Bashar al-Assad, who drops barrel bombs to massacre innocent children, because the alternative is surely worse.
The president says he's willing to work with Russia and Iran to find solutions for Syria's civil war. But he says Assad has to go. The president criticized Russia for its treatment of Ukraine. He also says Muslims need to reject the poisonous ideology of extremists, such as the Islamic State.
And no doubt ISIS and terrorism have been big points of topics for multiple speeches today.
That's Jason, right. And actually, President Obama will be leading a discussion on this issue tomorrow.
Okay, very good. We'll continue to cover it. Jason, thanks very much. Donald Trump calls for an overhaul of the U.S. tax code to eliminate income taxes for millions of Americans and lower taxes for the rich. The Republican presidential candidate laid out his tax plan this morning. It calls for eliminating federal income taxes on individuals earning less than $25,000 a year and married couples earning less than $50,000. He says he'll slash the corporate tax rate. Trump also proposed eliminating tax loopholes for hedge funds and private equity firms. Presidential candidate Carly Fiorina got quite a scare on Sunday at a campaign event. She was speaking at the National Association of Women Business Owners in San Antonio, Texas, when a line of curtains fell on the stage. No one was injured. Fiorina continued to address the crowd afterwards. NASA has made a critical discovery about the planet Mars. It could have ramifications in the search for life on that planet. Today, researchers announced Mars is not the arid planet they thought it was. They say under certain conditions, there is water. Researchers have known for years that Mars has ice on its poles. Images from an orbiter now show that salty water periodically flows across the planet's surface. The salt prevents the water from freezing in Mars' frigid temperatures. A spectacular sight graced the skies this weekend. A full moon and a total lunar eclipse coincide, creating a rare supermoon. Crowds gathered in Jerusalem to sing hymns and marvel at the lunar eclipse. Some consider the supermoon a sign of the end of times. Others have a less foreboding view. The next opportunity to see one will be 2033. Back to Brian Patrick now in Philadelphia for more on the Pope's visit this weekend at the World Meeting of Families. Brian?
Thank you, Wyatt, and our team in Washington, D.C. This is Cleanup Day here in Philadelphia, a city still savoring this incredible visit of the Vicar of Christ. Coming up, Pope Francis lives the corporal works of mercy, visiting inmates at a jail near Philadelphia, and a look back at the Pope's trip to Cuba through the eyes of a Cuban American. Today, the 28th of September, we celebrate Mary, Undoer of Knots. Before Mass yesterday, Pope Francis stopped at the Knotted Grotto just outside this basilica. People write problems on their ribbons and they pray for Our Lady to help them untangle their problems. Thanks for joining us from Philadelphia on this special edition of EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Perhaps the people with the tightest knots are those who are locked up and often forgotten. But as Mark Irons reports tonight, Pope Francis, while he was here in Philadelphia, made sure that these people will be remembered.
Brian, Pope Francis has been a strong voice for prisoners' rights, but it's not just talk. In Rome, he's washed the feet of prisoners, and now he becomes the first pope to visit a prison in the U.S. And the inmates at Philadelphia's current Overhaul correctional facility will never forget that visit.
I'm fortunate to be a part of this.
Gratitude can't be confined, even here.
It's beautiful, man. I feel grateful.
Pope Francis was thankful for his gift.
It's great to see him happy. He was smiling and
he liked the chair.
Built by prisoners in this maximum security jail, where Francis encouraged 100 inmates to get their lives back on track.
He's so compassionate. It's just awesome.
Dolores Perret was in the front row and was greeted by Francis.
You just told me, God bless you and your family. I really don't remember else. I was so excited.
Francis took time to visit all the prisoners, including Joseph Montalvo.
For him to come here to see us, it shows that he cares, that he loves, and it gives people a second chance.
Francis invoked the parable of Jesus washing his apostles' feet. He said everyone, including himself, needs to be cleansed. That message struck a chord with Joseph, who says drugs and bad choices have put him here.
But today gave me a different way. I should be out within a week or two. Within a week or two, I should be home, my family, where I belong at, where I'm gonna stay at. But this blessing here is definitely gonna keep me home.
Both the Pope and prisoners received a gift.
Brian, all the inmates were given rosaries blessed by Pope Francis. One says it's the best Sunday he's had in a while. He says the Pope's visit will definitely boost morale there.
If he uses that rosary, he'll have more blessed Sundays. Sure. Thank you, Mark. That's a beautiful story. President Obama addresses U.S.-Cuban relations at the United Nations in New York today. He says the United States will stand strong for human rights, but will do so through diplomacy.
As these contacts yield progress, I'm confident that our Congress will inevitably lift an embargo that should not be in place anymore.
Cuban President Raul Castro, who calls for an end to the economic blockade, plans to meet with Obama. Pope Francis wrote to both presidents last year, urging them to normalize relations. We talked with a Cuban-American physician about the Cuban relations and the Pope visiting the U.S. and Cuba and how that affects families both here and there. Dr. Grazie Pozo Christie is policy advisor for the Catholic Association, a medical doctor, and has a large family. Your experience here at the World Meeting of Families, what kind of hope does that give you for the family and specifically Catholic families here in America?
The encouragement is huge here because the enthusiasm is amazing in a time when sometimes one despairs that the family is almost over, that whole project is over, because there's so many things that are battering the family. But the enthusiasm here is fabulous, and there's so many people that are so devoted to preserving that institution.
Hispanic Americans must be really lifted up by the message that Pope Francis brings us.
It's so beautiful to hear him speak in our language, and he has these accents and the way he says things that they go directly to our hearts in the most beautiful way. I feel very sorry for people that don't have that language, so they can share that with him. And he does. He speaks directly to us, like our fathers speak to us or our grandfathers, and he knows our needs, and he knows the things that we suffer, and we can feel that in him.
On his way to America, he made a 4-day stop in Cuba. Your parents come from Cuba, and I know you're very close to the people there. Do you think that his visit there will help the Cuban people?
I have every hope that it will. As a Cuban, an exile, it was very difficult to watch the Pope in Cuba because it took all of our faith and all of our hope to watch him be merciful and open to people, the dictators whose hearts have been closed for so many decades. People we've been praying will finally loosen their hold on our brothers and sisters who don't deserve that kind of life that they give them. But I do believe that it's going to be successful, that the final fruit of his trip will be successful. And earlier at the UN, he spoke about something that means something to Cubans, that they should be allowed to be the dignified agents of their own destiny. All people should have that, even Cubans.
So that speech to the UN and all of his talks and homilies, he's really uplifted the family, and especially here at the World Meeting of Families. What do we take from this as we move forward as not only individual families, but as the family of the church?
That the individual family is the foundational part of the church and of all society and of our entire human civilization. And there can't be enough care, whether pastoral or economic or social care of the family. We can't take enough care of it because it's our future and it's everything that's beautiful about us.
Well, our best to your beautiful family, and thank you for joining us on EWTN News Nightly. Dr. Grazie Pozo Christie, thank you.
Thank you.
It was great to see Dr. Grazie here at the World Meeting of Families. So following that, the Festival of Families, just up the Parkway here, Benjamin Franklin Parkway, the people who went there were treated to a surprise performance. 14-year-old Bobby Hill of the Keystone State Boys Choir sang a solo from the opera Pais Jesus. Because of a last-minute set change, Hill was asked to sing just 5 minutes before he actually took the stage. After his performance, he handed Pope Francis a rock he and his fellow choir members brought back from a trip to Antarctica. Up next, a family drives all the way from Argentina to Philadelphia, and Pope Francis meets and prays with them. And a celebrity chef shows her love for the Pope, preparing simple, tasty meals for him in New York.
Ask you pray for me. Don't forget.
Don't forget, the Pope says, to pray for me. Pope Francis during Sunday's closing Mass on Benjamin Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia. Thanks for joining us for the Pope in America, our EWTN team here in Philadelphia, as well as in Washington, D.C. We appreciate you being with us at the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul in Philadelphia. So Pope Francis met with a family that had trekked 13,000 miles from Argentina in a classic VW bus, we used to call them. The family has been on the road nearly 200 days. The Holy Father met with the parents who quit their jobs to make the trip and 4 children Sunday morning. They talked about their journey and prayed together. It was a big surprise for this family.
Yes, we couldn't believe it because this was not planned. They called us this morning and we were like in shock. And it's like being with an old friend, really. He's so warm. He told us we were crazy.
The Argentines made 12 border crossings and stayed with dozens of host families, but they say the papal meeting topped everything.
But this is like the cherry in the cake, you know, being with the Pope.
Pope Francis told the family that he's been following their trip from his native land, and he told Father Federico Lombardi to make sure that the media knew about this. He explicitly said that. Damon Owens is with Theology, the Body Institute here in the Philadelphia area. Great to see you, Damon.
Good to see you, Brian.
You spoke at the World Meeting of Families. In a nutshell, what was your message?
We had a wonderful panel that was focused really on a very practical level of the busy family, spiritual life, and really the practical aspects of what it takes to imbue the spirituality or really the faith in large families. So it was a wonderful gathering.
So this is your home area. You
Yes.
know these people, you know this community, you live and work here. What do you think the lasting effect that the Holy Father's visit and the World Meeting of Families will have on this community?
Well, that's certainly the big question, and I do believe that any real presence, and I can call it a real presence of the Holy Father, unvarnished, unfiltered in terms of his impromptu comments and his particular speeches, it's just invigorating to see. You can know when he's talking off the cuff. You know when you're hearing his heart. I really do believe that this mercy and this accompaniment is really a gift that Francis has transmitted one-to-one to people in Philadelphia.
Do you think it has the potential to reach the world? The world was watching from Philadelphia and from the other places, and that puts Philadelphia really at a leadership role of extending this mission, this ministry beyond this weekend.
I agree. It was one thing to hear him from afar, even to watch on television, but having witnessed and having heard him firsthand, much of his message was very personal. It was an appeal for us as particular Catholics and believers to really follow the gospel in the way that he's asking. So I found it refreshing hearing him, again, unfiltered from the usual media. And for one, my family, we are just invigorated.
John Paul II gave us Theology of the Body that you work with. He came here in 1979. Is Francis continuing that on?
You know, this World Made of Families began about a year ago in terms of the theology of the body with the preparatory catechism. And that catechism, rich, 10 chapters and an everyday theology of the body. And the Congress that preceded his visit was just rich again in all of those speakers in theology of the body. So those of us who were in this felt very comfortable and very excited that, in fact, he's well on board with this theology of the body.
Damon Owens, thank you.
Great to be with you, Brian.
And Damon, the Holy Father ate well while he was in New York City. Celebrity chef Lydia Bastianich prepared and served all the Holy Father's New York meals. The food was simple and healthy. Reportedly, the Pope's doctor wants him to lose a few pounds. The gourmet chef says serving good food is a beautiful way to express love.
For me, it's giving some gratitude back, some things, because, you know, I'm a refugee myself coming here, and so I was fed by people that care, and so I understand the communication that food can have.
We're told the Pope had some simple food requests. One was water and bananas on his night table. Well, we are back in Washington tomorrow. We appreciate you joining us from Philadelphia tonight. For our team here in Philly and in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick. We're going to leave you tonight from this beautiful basilica with some of the wonderful memories of this historic apostolic journey of Pope Francis to the United States. Thanks for joining us. Good night.